Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Today's podcast is a request from a listener. She wrote in and shared that she struggles with ADD and that it affects her business and therefore her profitability. She asked me if I could address this issue, and so I went on the hunt. I started researching and listening to other podcasts and trying to find places where someone who really knew about ADD, ADHD, and how it would affect us as entrepreneurs. Where are they hanging out and can they talk to us? And so in my search, I found Peter Shankman. Peter is a 5-time best-selling author, an entrepreneur, and a speaker who focuses on customer service in the new emerging customer economy. He is recognized worldwide for new ways to think about the customer experience, social media, PR, marketing, advertising, and ADHD. Peter is a father, a 2-time Ironman triathlete, a Class B licensed skydiver, and an avid Peloton rider. You're going to see later why those things are important to the conversation. He lives in New York City at this point with his daughter and his 19-year-old cat. But let me just warn you, this is a really fast-paced podcast. I thought I talked fast. People tell me all the time that I think and process quickly, but I'm going to tell you, Peter outdoes me. So if you normally listen on 1.5 to 2 times speed, you really might want to consider that on this one. And if you don't have ADHD or ADD, this is still a podcast for you for many reasons, but simply because the ideas and suggestions Peter makes in his book, Faster Than Normal, are tools that we can all use, and many of which I found that I already do. I think that really shocked me a little bit coming from, I have a family members that have dyslexia and ADD. I don't have it, and I was really shocked that many of the things that he suggests in the book were practices that I had already put into effect in my own life, and that's probably why I get done the amount of things that I get done. And so you can almost look at this podcast not just as ADD, ADHD focused, but as offering you some productivity hacks. Plus, even if you don't have ADD or ADHD, you may very well have a staff member now or at some point or a family member who does. And so if you do nothing else, listen in for ways that maybe you can help them. Peter also has a podcast called Faster Than Normal. So if you want to follow up more on this topic, that might be a great place to start. While my podcast is usually clean with no language, there are a few words in this one, and I'm just letting you know in case you're listening with kids in the car. Now, on to the podcast. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Peter, I'm so glad that you're on the podcast today.
Oh, me too. Glad to be here.
Great. So, Peter, I've shared with you, but I want to share with everybody else. The topic that we're going to talk about today is ADD, ADHD, how it affects the workplace and profitability. But I want to just, again, reiterate, as I did in the opening, even if you don't have ADD and ADHD, there are plenty of things that you can learn from our conversation today. And as a matter of fact, I got your book. We'll talk about that. And as I was reading it and really processing it, I personally don't have ADD or ADHD. However, I have just normally and on my own implemented almost all of the things that you talk about in your book, which has made me extremely productive. And so just like you, I kind of just started doing these things. I've been doing them for years. And people always ask me, Michelle, how do you get so much done? How do you get more done than other people? And I realized that I was following a lot of the same kind of suggestions and rituals that you offer in your book, Faster Than Normal. So I want everybody to hang on, because if you're not ADD, you may have an employee, a friend, or somebody else who is, who could really benefit from this. Would you agree?
I would. And I also say that, the beauty of the book and the podcast and sort of the life I've built for myself is that it's not really about having ADHD. It's about making yourself more productive and using the sort of rules that I put into my life because I have ADHD. So it's not mandatory that you have ADHD to do this stuff. It just sort of happens to work that it does.
Absolutely. And I think that's, and it's not that I didn't know that, but I think it just really became solid. And I don't even think I realized till the end of reading the book that I was like, oh my gosh, I do those things. Okay, so that's why. So that it was just really cool. And I'll tell you, I live with a son who has dyslexia and ADD, ADHD. So of course, when I'm looking in and seeing a lot of these tools, I'm thinking how it could help him in college. Go ahead, and we've done some of them, but probably not to the extent that we need to really help him. So I love that what we're going to talk about transcends business. It's life, right? It's all aspects of our life, and that there are lessons and, again, rules and rituals and ideas that can cross all of those boundaries.
Great. No question about it.
So you've been very open about having ADHD and looking at it as a positive. Tell us how you decided or what changed your mind from it being a problem, or a disease or a disorder into an ability and a gifting.
Well, when I was growing up, ADHD didn't exist. When I was in school, it was called sit down, you're disrupting the class disease. And so for me, I really never had, I was never diagnosed until I was older. There was no medication when I was a kid. I don't think my parents would have put me on it anyway. And so for me, it was really about, growing up, junior high and all that, high school was tough. And it wasn't until sort of my early 30s, mid 30s, that I really started to realize, okay, I do things differently, but I seem to be doing okay. By that point, I'd started and sold a company. I was close to selling my second one. I hadn't even started HARO yet. And I'm like, I'm doing okay. And then I forgot about it again, because that's what happens when you're ADHD. And then when I sold HARO, I'm like, all right, I got to sit down and really take some time and figure out how come I can start and sell 3 companies in the span of 20 years and do really well in all 3 of them. But the garbage that I took out of the kitchen and put by the front hall so I'd remember to take it out this morning or 3 days ago has been sitting there for 3 days. Why is it that I'm so good at some things and so terrible at other things? I got to figure that out. And that is when I really started realizing that's when I got diagnosed. That's when I realized all this stuff. I'm like, okay, this can be beneficial because apparently, I've figured out a way to make it beneficial. So I just have to figure out what I've been doing and how I've been doing it and how I can do more of it.
We went through the same process with the dyslexia. So I was I was in the whole junior high school in the 80s, similar to you. And my husband has dyslexia as well. But of course, none of that was ever diagnosed. You were slow to read, or you were a bad speller, or whatever, however they described it at that point. So my husband was diagnosed in his 30s when we diagnosed our son.
Right.
And we're like, oh, that's what that is. Oh, that's where that comes from. And
a lot of parents, for the first time in the past 10 years, a lot of parents are being diagnosed with ADHD, and it's coming down to the fact that they're bringing their kids in.
That's right. That's right. You had more energy, or the difference was recognized, but it was usually explained away, honestly, as a behavior issue.
Exactly.
And not anything else. And so one of the first things we did was, of course, some people look at dyslexia and ADD and all of these things as terrible things. We went on a journey of how do we look at the good of this? Because there is a lot of good. It just means your brain works differently. And how do we celebrate the difference? And how do we tap into that? And so, once we kind of got the dyslexia handled, we then have to still handle the ADD because it comes with it to some degree. And our therapist explained it like this: if you're sitting in a room and they're talking to you in Chinese and you don't understand it, you're going to daydream, you're going to squirrel, you're going to go somewhere else. And so that's what happens many times when we mix these things up. And so so I can totally see, like, if you're having to do things you don't enjoy, how it can get you distracted. But do you think having ADD before you kind of learned how to manage it, how did it affect you in business? How did it affect your profitability in business, do you think?
So when I got diagnosed, for me, it was really sort of a wake-up call. Not so much like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me, but holy crap, all this stuff I've been doing, both positives and negatives, now has a name.
Yeah.
Once I realized it had a name, it was a lot easier to start figuring out what it meant, what I could do with it, where it was going to go. And that was pretty awesome because that allowed me to look at my life in an entirely different way. You know, I figured out, wow, there's a reason that on the days I work out, I'm much more energetic and I'm much more focused. Okay, that's dopamine, right? And so I started researching all the scientific aspects of ADHD, and what I realized, what I learned, essentially people with ADHD have about 25% less monoamine inhibitors, and so they produce less dopamine, serotonin, and adrenaline in their brains. Dopamine, serotonin, and adrenaline are the focus chemicals. They're the chemicals that make us happy. They're the chemicals that allow us to focus, allow us to sit down and say, okay, you pay attention for the next 45 minutes in math class because you have to do math, right? Most normal people just sit down. Okay, I have to pay attention. They pay attention. People like me, oh God, I hate math. What can I? And so we start looking around. It's not that we're distracted. We're actually looking for something to excite us, to give us that dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, so we can focus. And so the fascinating part about that, once I realized that, I'm like, okay, I could go on medication, or how about I figure out what things in my life give me dopamine, serotonin, and adrenaline? And I realized, holy crap, this explains why I took people skydiving as a publicity stunt. 150 people went skydiving, 149 of them walked away and said, okay, great, that was fun. I'll check that off my bucket list. I signed up for lessons, right? Wow. So I got certified. You know, I did my first 5K. Most people, did my 5K, chalk it off their list. No, I've done 2 Ironman, right? So as soon as I understood this, it made a lot more sense, and I could start focusing on ways to do that positively and use it for my benefit. Now, the downside of that is that there are ways of getting those chemicals that aren't necessarily the best things in the world for you. And it's because of that most people with ADHD, essentially, I've coined this phrase, I have 2 speeds, and only 2 speeds. My 2 speeds are namaste and I'll cut a, and there's no middle ground there. Okay, there is no middle ground there. And so what that means is that if I am doing something that's very beneficial for me, I will do it over and over and over again. But if I'm doing something that gives me that same chemicals but's not good for me, I could do that over and over again too. And so because of that, especially being an entrepreneur and working on my own, I've had to learn how to avoid the things in my life, avoid putting the things in my life that could cause me that kind of distress. A perfect example, I don't drink anymore.
Yeah, I read that in your book because you didn't realize at the beginning, as you said, you didn't start drinking until you were older, and then you realized that it really slowed you down, and it took away, if you will, the joy and the excitement and the ability to do all those things that you had already been doing. It took you back. Didn't you write something tell us about writing on the bag?
Yeah, so I had a really bad night once. I woke up at 5 in the morning or something. I had to catch a flight, and I had been out drinking till 1 a.m. with clients. And I just felt like crap. I was dehydrated. I was tired. I had a headache. I just wrote all those things down on paper before I left for the airport, and I put it in my wallet. And for a while when I was thinking about having a drink, I reread that paper because I'm not going to have 1 drink and go home. I'm going to have 6 drinks. Not because I'm trying to get drunk, just because they're there and that's what we do. And so sort of playing the tape forward and imagining how I'm going to feel the next morning is usually a good way for me not to make sure I'm not drinking.
So let's talk about that working forward and working backwards. When I usually teach and help people create like their goals or their plans in their life, one of the things we do is we do an exercise where we project forward, what do you want it to be, and then work backwards. And I know you talk about a very similar thing in the book about working backwards, kind of identifying where you're trying to get to and going back and creating those intermediary steps to actually get you there. Talk to us a little bit about the working backwards.
Yeah, so it's sort of, I call it playing the tape forwards and playing the tape backwards. I look along the lines of, okay, where do I want to be tonight? Well, when I wake up in the morning, like let's say I don't want to go to the gym or I don't want to get on the bike, oh, I'm tired. Well, okay, where do I want to be tonight? Well, I want to have had a good day. I want to have gotten stuff done. I want to feel like I'm accomplished something. I want to be exhausted so I can go to sleep and start and do it all over again tomorrow. Well, if you sleep in, think about how that's going to happen. You're not going to be as productive. You might not go to work as well. You might not eat as healthy as you should. All this can change, and you can get that end result that you want if you just get your ass out of bed and get onto the bike 6 inches away from your bed. And so it's really about learning how to do that, right? And just teaching yourself, hey, it's okay to fail every once in a while, but don't make it a habit. And here's what's going to happen if you do make it a habit. Here's where you're going to be in 12 hours, 24 hours, 3 months from now. Let's not go down that road.
And you also talk about a couple of things that you put into place that I think are super important for us as business owners as well. I wrote down just like your high level thoughts on these, and it was create rituals, not resolutions. And then I love how you even talk about within the ritual to create fail safes. So even when you work backwards, we still have to do the things that we have to do to get us where we want to go. How have you found rituals help you? And what would you say if you had to, if there was only one ritual that you had to do consistently, what would it be?
It would be exercise, no question about it. The simple act. I mean, I got in late last night from a flight, and I was tired this morning. I still managed to get up and do 30 minutes on the bike. Just those 30 minutes alone was enough to give me the energy, the endorphins that I needed to get through my morning, and feeling good right now. And again, the thing is, it could have been, I have to take my daughter to the dentist today at 10, so I didn't have to rush and get her up, and I could have slept in, but I would have not been as good, right? And so instead, I went I went on the bike. I got the workout in. I got the endorphins, and I'm feeling great now.
And so knowing that some of these things you do not necessarily because you love exercise, right? I love in the book, you're like, I'm not telling you to go like lift heavy things, but it's using the benefits of exercise in a way. It's so interesting too. The psychologist told us when we were looking at how to treat the dyslexia and the ADD and all that without medication, if at all possible. She said, if you don't medicate or teach them how to self-medicate with good things, they will medicate with bad.
No question about it. And I'd even suggest also that, self-medication in terms of, for me, like I said, exercise. Look, I have a prescription for an ADHD medicine. I'm not denying that. I'm not anti-med, but I only take it about 3 or 4 times a month because I take it on days when I can't get to the gym or when I need, extra boost for whatever reason. But normally I can make my own. But the thing about meds is that pills don't teach skills.
That's right.
And the problem is that if you put a kid on ADHD meds at 5, maybe they don't even have ADHD. Maybe they're just acting like they're 5 because they're freaking 5. Well, they're on those meds till they're 21, 25. Now they're off their parents' insurance. Now they can't get those meds. But you know what? They haven't learned anything about how to handle their issues.
Right. And those things exacerbate as we get older. One of the rituals that I love that you mentioned was that if you need to get up at a certain time and that your habit may be to hit that snooze button, that there are fail safes or things that you can put into place. Let's say a light bulb that comes on. I think you mentioned a Wi-Fi light bulb.
My lights are all automatic. My shades come up automatically at 3:45 a.m. I even had a friend of mine. I knew a guy who put upside down thumbtacks on his snooze bar. He hit it once. He never hit it again.
Yeah, so we're teaching ourselves these things. So I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I have to take insulin every day. And so I've had to create rituals anyway. It's just the way I do things so that I can do the same things and get the same results. And I know that because I do have a ritual with my insulin, I can sometimes think, did I do that or did I not? Like if I'm not mentally engaged, I'm just kind of going through my ritual list. And then because I do it every day, the memory is not as clear to me of was that today or was that yesterday. And so the fail safe that I put in behind that was there is a lid that connects onto my insulin pen that actually has a readout of how long it's been since the lid came off.
Yep.
And so that way, if I am going through the ritual and I forget, I can look at that lid and go, okay, this has not come off in 24 hours. It is time for me to do the insulin. Or, oh my gosh, the countdown is an hour. Yeah, I did it. I do the same thing with my meds. I do the same thing with my morning. I start up and do like the miracle morning. And those things, just creating these habits and these rituals and fail safes are super important. And I know you really talk a lot about rituals and finding the ones that work for you.
Yep. Awesome.
And I got to share the one that where you talk about eating real food and you called it the apple test.
Yep.
Yeah. Share that with everybody.
Yeah. So like I'm the kind of person who can think about food and my brain will automatically tell me I'm hungry even if I'm not. And so I use this apple test, which essentially says, okay, you're hungry. Do you want this apple? I don't want an apple. Then you're not hungry. Right? It's very simple. If I do want an apple and I'm willing to eat the apple, then I'm obviously hungry.
Right. And I think that's a good, we can almost take that and use it in a lot of other ways, right? Is this really what I need right now? And almost even the feeling, do I need a drink, right? No,
Yep.
maybe I don't need a drink, but what else could I use? Is it that I'm dehydrated? Is it that I'm stressed? Do I need a walk? What other thing do I need that drink or that
Yep.
item that I'm putting into my life represents?
No question about it. You know, and a lot of times boredom masks itself as hunger.
Yes.
Or, hunger masks itself as boredom. And, you know, you're not actually, no, I was right. Boredom masks itself as hunger. You're not actually hungry. You're just bored. Go out and do something. Go take a walk. Go explore the world. Go for a workout, something like that.
We also, in the interior design industry, of course, we're like the construction industry. So there are projects and projects to manage and ideas coming in, client after client. So we're constantly bombarded with a lot of things. We're jumping from project to project to project. And I thought about especially the part in the book where you talk about the developer who worked in a company that didn't have deadlines and how he was working towards, like, woohoo, no deadline. And then he realized that when the second project came in, he switched gears and was focused to get that one done, but he missed the first. And that can happen so easily in our industry where we move from thing to thing because there's so much input. And setting those deadlines and working backwards is hugely important. And I noticed you mentioned it multiple times. And one of the things that you also said was live your life 30 minutes early.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about that 30 minutes early and how that works.
It's really simple. You basically just want to make sure that everything you're doing in your life is you're planning to do it 30 minutes early. So if you have to be at a meeting at 9, work backwards to the point where you say, okay, that means I have to leave the house at 8, which means I have to be up by 7 and get in the shower and blah, 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 which means I should probably set the alarm for 7. No, set the alarm for 6:30. Give yourself that extra half hour. You're much calmer. You're much more relaxed. You have less to worry about. It's a much easier way to not have to worry about being late. You have and if anything happens, the train was late. Well, I took care of it because I have an extra half hour. You could build that in.
I found as a young mom with 2 little boys, I always tried to cram that next thing in. Really, how much can I get done? And then I would rush them around trying to get them out the door and realize that the problem wasn't them. The problem was me trying to cram too much in and not leaving that space of being ready 30 minutes early or giving myself time and not always cramming in that next thing. And that's why I really like that 30 minutes early. And it's funny, you mentioned that your seatmate, I guess you were on the plane riding, and he was like, I think with another similar example, he would just tell somebody that your dinner reservation was 30 minutes earlier if they were late. And I have friends, I think we all have friends who are habitually late. And, I agree with you. I don't want to always have to lie and tell them that the time is earlier. I really would just prefer them and myself to have the skill set of being early.
Right.
Our band director used to tell our kids that early is on time and on time is late.
No question about it. And I had a Navy SEAL instructor who was a friend of mine who said the same thing. No question about it.
Yeah, he just pounded it into their head. One
of the easiest things in the world to do, right? And it makes such an incredible impression when you're early. It's if you're late to a meeting with me, I'm already starting off with a negative impression of you.
Right. Because you're thinking, is this not important to you? Why didn't you schedule time? And when we're in an industry where things are moving all the time, I think sometimes too, our human tendency, whether we're, struggle with ADD or focus or anything, our natural tendency is almost to underestimate the amount of time something's going to take. So that already gets us, in trouble when we're scheduling quite often. And then if you add in focus, or even like me, trying to cram in that one more thing, if you're not careful, it can really push you past the point of being able to stay on top of it. You also mentioned, which I think leads into the professional triggers, you suggest really getting to know your triggers, and they can be a little different for other people. But the 2 that were the professional triggers that you mentioned that I thought I really wanted to explore a little bit was the thought of not getting things done, or too long a list, or I'm not getting anything done, or I'm not getting it done on time. Like this whole I'm behind, I've got too much, I can't get it done. How do you think that plays into our profitability and just, success in the company?
I think that, having a situation where you can understand your timeline and not be afraid of it, and understand, okay, you know what, I work on this for 45 minutes, then I take 10 minutes to chill, then I work on this, right? Whatever works for you. For some, that works for some people. For me, I'm a big fan of working with head down with no interruptions for as long as 12, 14 hours at a shot, and then coming up for air. That's actually how I've written my last 3 books, entirely on airplanes, right, with no breaks. It depends on what works for you, but the key is to have some sort of plan. Whatever it is that does work for you, stick to it. Because it's only when you start getting distracted that then you start falling behind, and then you have tons of things to do. And in the end, if you're able to put these things down on paper, say, okay, I'm going to do this here and this here and this here, what you're doing is you are eating the elephant one bite at a time. And it's a lot easier to eat an elephant one bite at a time than to look at an elephant and say, oh my God, I can't finish that.
And so how did you go about really identifying your triggers? What was the process you went through that went, all right, so this is one that is happening to me repeatedly? Because sometimes, when you're in the middle of this, you're just getting by. That's what I hear from my clients. I'm just getting through it. I'm just doing it. And I make a joke that my to-do list has babies at night. So when I wake up, it's longer than it was when I went to bed. And so that's kind of the feeling, right? There's like, you wake up and there's like 75 emails of all these other things that need to be done. And so they always feel behind, and they're struggling with feeling less than when they really are being quite productive, but it doesn't feel that way. So how did you go through the process of identifying this is a trigger for me? This is specifically mine, right?
Yeah. For me, it's when I realize what a trigger is, I stop myself and accept what it is, right? I don't try to fight it. I don't try to say, oh, this sucks, I can beat this. I just say, okay, you know what? This is a trigger. And this is something that I'm going to have to figure out a way to deal with. And I figure out ways around it, right? If you can't break through the rock, there's no point in trying to constantly, you're going to bang your head, you're going to hurt yourself. Figure out a way around it. And so for me, my trigger is in the morning, getting decision paralysis. What should I wear is a trigger. So I simply got over that by arranging my closet in such a way. The only thing in my closets are T-shirts and jeans, and they're labeled. That side of the closet's labeled office/travel, and on the other side it's labeled speaking/TV, and it's button-down shirt, jacket, and jeans. I wake up, I look at what day it is, I look at what's on my calendar, I know how to get dressed. I keep all the other stuff in another closet, another room.
So, but what made you realize at first that was even a trigger? Was it that you realized that you got either distracted or frustrated or showed up in the wrong clothes? What made it for that particular one? How did you even realize?
I'd go to get dressed, I'd see a sweater, I'd be like, oh my God, I remember that sweater. Laura gave me that sweater. I wonder how she's doing. I should look her up. It's 3 hours later, I'm naked in the living room on Facebook, and I look up and I went, that's a problem.
Got it. So then you start realizing that you started with one task and ended up doing something else.
Exactly.
And realized that there was a loss of time or a loss of focus, and that's what alerted you to, okay, wait a minute, here's my trigger.
Yep.
Okay. Because I think sometimes it's easy to say what's your trigger, but if you don't even know how to identify, and I bet sometimes they're also identified based on how you feel.
No question about it.
Okay.
No question about it. And again, you have to understand yourself. I
think too, I love where you mentioned, and I know that I found this to be true for me, and I really think that I know it helps my ADD clients when we work through this, is simplifying your environment. I love you made the statement, clutter is a distraction waiting to happen.
No question about it. You got to make sure things are taken care of. It will destroy you. It will simply destroy you. You got to make sure you work in a clean environment. You got to make sure you're working in a place where things are working for you. Yeah, you have to do it. When you're ADHD, there is just no two ways around that.
And I think a lot of times I've heard people that are ADD, they make excuses for it. They laugh it off. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be lighthearted about certain things, right? We don't have to take everything so seriously. But it's almost like, yeah, you see all this clutter, you see all this mess. I'm a hot mess. And that doesn't really come off professional either when you walk around telling everybody you're a hot mess.
That's the thing. Why would you tell people that?
Why would you tell people that? It's terrible. And I think to myself, well, I don't really want to be associated with somebody who's going around telling everybody they're a hot mess, because now I'm one by association. So that's weird. I think it's much better if we straighten it up. So I know even when my son was in school, they started, because my husband and I had him in a school for dyslexia. And one of the things they taught them was rituals with color. And so they taught them things like the red notebook will always be math. The green notebook will always be English. The blue notebook will always be social studies.
Love it.
Whatever.
Love it.
All the teachers supported it the exact same way. So the entire school had the exact same filing and organizing system for every kid in the school for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then what they did was, so that meant that for 3 straight years, no matter what teacher they went to, the colors were, everything was the same. And when he left that school to go into high school, he carried those same color coding all the way through because it helped him stay.
He'll keep them for the rest of his life. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And what's also interesting is we don't all organize the same. Nope. I don't think like he thinks. So if I tried to organize something, he would come in and think that I had made a mess. And so we have learned to let him organize the way he needs to, and I organize the way I need to. And I think that's important to kind of relieve us of the idea that if you've bought somebody's, planning system or organizing system and it doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean planning and organizing doesn't work. It means that system's not working
for you. Exactly. And that's what I tell people. It's like, look, everyone says, oh, you get up at 3:45 a.m. I could never do that. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to do what works for you.
Right. And then to identify it and then to duplicate it over and over and over.
In a way that works for you. Exactly.
Yeah. And so we're eliminating these choices. We're eliminating distractions. We're doing the things that really support us and support our body. So, again, and I think the lessons are so deep and broad here because I'm diabetic. I know there are certain foods that it'd be like equivalent to you having the drink. There are certain foods that make me feel like crap after I've eaten them. So why would I eat them, even if everybody around me is doing it, when my body cannot process it or does not process it well? Why would I do that to myself? And so it's almost really digging into how you want to feel, which is your kind of projecting forward, looking forward. What do I want the outcome to be of my business, of my life, of my relationships? And here's what I'm personally dealing with. How do I maneuver? How do I, like you said, work around that rock that's in my way to get there? And so that's why I think the suggestions and the things that you offer in the book, Faster Than Normal, are so good, regardless of whether it's ADD or ADHD. That's your challenge.
Well, thank you.
They're just good life skills.
And again, that's the thing. These are things that I learned simply because I have ADHD, but turns out they work for anyone.
Yeah, who knew? Who knew? So I do want to touch on one thing because, you definitely, I think, are a risk taker. Do you think that you would naturally be a risk taker, Peter, or do you think that is something that is exacerbated with ADD?
Honestly, don't know. I've been a risk taker all my life, but I honestly don't know. If I didn't have ADHD, would I still be a risk taker? I can't tell you.
Yeah.
I know that. I didn't realize why I remember getting in trouble because my parents took me in Hawaii and I watched what the cliff divers were doing, the amateur cliff divers in Maui, and we were watching for the beach and I said, oh, I'm take a walk. And I think I was like 12 and I wound up cliff diving from like 75 feet high and I felt amazing. So I think it's really funny because it's kind of like, my parents went insane. Why would you do that? What's out of your mind? I just thought it was fun. And I didn't realize at the time I was feeling so great because I was getting a hit, right? I was getting, so it's just funny when you think about that because I don't know what I'd be if I didn't have ADHD. Maybe I'd be as successful, maybe I'd be more successful, maybe less. I honestly couldn't tell you.
Yeah, and I think too, I know that scares some of my friends who have kids with ADHD that are big risk takers. It makes them fearful to put them behind the wheel of a car, right? Until they're really ready and to really be able to harness that risk taking. Like you talked about skydiving and other things. And, I love how you said in the book, you wouldn't think that somebody who could lose focus, you would really want to be skydiving. But in that moment, you're so hyper focused that you're probably safer than a lot of the rest of us.
No question about it. It works perfectly because I am exactly what I need to do. It's exactly where I need to be, and it gives me everything I need to do. And I remember the first time my mother ever saw me skydive, she watched me pack my parachute and double check and triple check everything. And she came over to me and she said, I've never seen this much focus and determination in one thing. You figured out ways to cut corners everywhere. I've never seen you do it this way. I love this. She was thrilled. She still wasn't thrilled I jumped out of a plane, but she loved what I was doing.
Right. I think too that there are some risky behaviors that we can take that can put us in positions of danger. But there are other ways that we can, in your words, get the hit very naturally and normally. Like, I love how you talked about running up the stairs, walking around the block, dropping and doing push-ups. You said that you did at least 20 minutes on a treadmill or something before you went into big meet. You found these ways to, in a non-risky, hurtful way to also, but you made this comment that I thought was seriously, not that I didn't think the rest of it was fascinating, as you can tell, but this part I really thought was interesting is those, and I think it was you were saying, I'm surmising this, so I don't know that you said that you had maybe the medical data to support it, but in your estimation and experience, when you get that hit of serotonin, dopamine, and all that, for those with ADD, ADHD, there's a longer tail. It lasts longer because you made the comment about jumping out of the airplane and then going and taking your laptop and sitting down and working like a crazy man because it lasted you longer than maybe somebody like me that, I would feel a rush when it was over, but my body would take care of that and, it would be gone faster.
100% right.
Have you talked to other people? Did they experience it similarly?
Yes. I find that everyone I've talked to has had sort of that same reaction, in that, again, it's all or nothing. Once they find something they love, they throw themselves into it 100%, all those kind of things. Definitely.
Wow. So if you could offer one piece of advice to those in the interior design industry or any industry to be more profitable as they try to deal with ADHD in themselves or in their staff, what would it be?
For those who don't have it, it could look like everything from we're lazy to we're screw-ups to how come we can be so inspired on one thing and then completely, what are you, bipolar? Just try to hear them when they talk and when they explain what's going on. And I'm not saying cut them slack. I'm not saying, treat them differently. Understand that what they have can be used to tremendous advantage if they learn how to use it. And if they are trying, understand that and give them credit for it. And realize that nothing they do is ever, ever, ever intentionally done to intentionally hurt or screw up your business or your life or whatever. And chances are, if they've made a mistake, which they will, they feel so much worse about it than you could ever conceivably feel. You have no idea.
Yeah. My sons have said, by the time you're beating me up, I've already beat myself up 10 times.
Exactly.
I think too, it's important if we're talking especially about employees. That's why I think it is so important to have the right people in the right positions doing the right work.
No question about it. I think that what we find is that when people get the job they love, the productivity levels go through the roof, right? I mean, doing your job 8-10 hours a day, why would you want to do something you don't like?
Yeah. And getting through certain aspects of their job can be torturous. I know just from watching there are certain aspects of school, of college, of things that my son it is torturous. It's one of those things he has to do, but it's torturous. But you put him in his element, and like you said, it's hours and hours, and it didn't feel like work. And he comes home and, he may be exhausted, but he is like on cloud 9 because it's exactly when you hear Richard Branson and all these others that have either ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, all these other differences, that's what they say. When you find the thing you love, and then that's where you can focus and you can get help and delegate. And for all those other things, then you really get to shine. And so I think it is important that, like you said, not necessarily to be cutting slack, like you don't have to do the work, but making sure that if you have staff or you, right, even if you're the owner of the company and you have ADD, ADHD, create a company and a plan and a support system that allows you to do what you really do well. Don't force yourself that all day long you're having to do what you don't do well. I mean, why would we start a business that we struggled all day, every day?
No question about it. No question about it.
You don't have to.
Love what you do and find ways to do it better. I think it's just the best way to put it.
So, Peter, what are you working on next? What's your next big goal?
Well, I currently have an event. I have a mastermind called. I have a mastermind group, about 150 entrepreneurs. A lot of them with ADHD, some without, but just all who love the camaraderie we get by working together. It's called ShankMinds, and that's at ShankMinds.com. It's an online group, and then every 6 months we do a live event, and we're doing a huge event in Vegas for about 100 people next week, actually, at in Las Vegas. But the online group is at ShankMinds.com. We'd love new members who are looking to find their own tribe.
Awesome. And you have a podcast, which I'll have links to all of this in the show notes, Faster Than Normal, that explores ADD and ADHD, right? Focus, productivity, all that. And you have multiple excellent books. I'm going to go get some of the rest one, but I just devoured Faster Than Normal, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
So, Peter, I really appreciate your time today and just helping jump in and talk about ADD and ADHD and demystify it a little bit. And to really just, what I love more than anything is showing that it is a difference, but it is one that can be harnessed and can be used, and that there's a lot of beauty and opportunity if we recognize it and work with it instead of against it.
No question about it. ADHD is a gift, not a curse.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Wow, that was seriously fast-paced, right? I highly recommend the book Faster Than Normal, and as you know, it'll be in the show notes. There are helpful hints and tactics for all of us. And as we consider getting things done, don't forget to really focus on your business growth. So 2 things I've got that I want you to do. Normally, we only ask for 1, but I've got 2 today. The first one is I want you to join me at Luann Nagara Live. It is going to be such a blast. It is 3 days, March the 30th through April the 1st, and we're going to be having pretty much like a live podcast going on stage. So you don't want to miss that. It's going to be an awesome educational time and just a time to network with others. You can find a link to that on my website at scarletthreadconsulting.com. And while you're on the website, click the purple button at the top and do a health checkup on your company. Look at it and really figure out where you should focus your attention this year. And then if you have to use one of the productivity hacks, take a run for 20 minutes and then find something to jump in and do. All right. Have a great day. Thanks.